Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Danny Kim. I'm Vice President for Administration and Finance, and it's my pleasure on behalf of the campus to welcome all of you to this final forum. This is a combined campus and public forum for our master plan. We've been working at this for a long time. We had our kickoff meeting back in January 2018. We've been at it for almost 20 months now, and so tonight marks a major milestone in that all of the comments and feedback that we have received and all the work that everybody on this campus and also community members have done working with our team and our architects culminates to today's presentation, which is what we call a preferred option for our campus master plan. So our architects will provide you with more detailed information on what that plan is. So with that said, before we get to the architects, I would like to invite our president of the university, Virgie, for his remarks.
Coming up here because I feel taller. And that doesn't happen to me very often. No, I just actually want to be able to see you all when I'm talking to you. Welcome, and I'm glad you're here for what Danny called the Preferred Option Campus Master Plan presentation. When you say the phrase preferred option regarding a master plan, it sort of begs two questions. The first is, whose preference? And the answer to that I hope you'll recognize by the time we're done with this conversation is all of ours, yours, the people from our campus faculty, staff, and students, the people from the community whose input went into this. It's our preferred preference, we hope. We value the faculty input, the staff input, the students input, the community input that we receive. The second question, obviously, in preferred option is how many options were there? And oh my goodness, there were many, many options. We went through, over this 2-year journey, reviewing so many different ideas and concepts to narrow it down to this single preferred option. In fact, as we gather today for sort of getting close to the finish line of this community-wide effort, this has been a complex process. Typically, you complete this process every 10 years or so. We are overdue, way overdue. I think we're at 16 years now since our last master plan. And it is an absolutely vital process. I want to make sure that's clear. The purpose of this is to create a student-centered vision for who we are going to be and where we're going to go as a physical plant on our campus, looking at the integrity and continuity and the proper allocation of the resources for our buildings and the refurbishing of our campus over time, but looking at it through the lens of student success, of making sure that we create a place and space and community for our students that will promote that success even more than what we have now. I will say the master plan from the past has helped us. That's where we got our Titan Student Union that we are in right now. That's we got the parking structures that we have and the ones that we're building. That's how we got the Clay's Performance Arts Center. And you'll see some more extensive listings of some of those things that we've done as part of the master planning process in the past in a little while. Our new plan will seek to maximize available space, which of course is important, but to retain green space and open space while supporting our core academic mission of student success and working in coordination with and in alignment with our strategic plan for the next 5 years that we passed last year. I will tell you that as an executive vice chancellor and general counsel at the chancellor's office, I saw a lot of master plans across the campuses. Most of them were highly aspirational and most often unachievable, to be quite honest with you. They got finished and they got put on a shelf, and they didn't influence much of what happened over the next several years because they were too expensive or we were too resource poor. Our approach has been to be aspirational, and we have to be aspirational, but it's also been to be practical and achievable because we want to actually make progress. We don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're not going to tear down all our buildings and build new ones. We know that'll never happen, and so we shouldn't plan that way. But we are looking for building interactive learning spaces and communities. We are looking for providing community for our students. We are looking for a better flow of traffic and better access for our students, creating better collaborative academic space, better research space for our faculty and for our students, better workspace for our faculty and our staff, better stewards of place for our community, which is part of our obligation. And of course, of highest importance, a safer and more welcoming campus for all our Titans, for everyone who lives and works on this campus. So it's very important to understand that the master plan is a blueprint. It's a blueprint for all those things that I just identified. It's a roadmap of what we would like this 61-year-old campus to look like in 10 or 15 years and as we grow over the next couple of decades. It's also, though, a controlling document. If a project appears on this master plan, then it's sort of been gone through the first hurdle of being approved to be built from a planning perspective, from an environmental impacts analysis, and we don't have to go back and do that every single time. That's the purpose of the master plan. If a project isn't on this master plan, if it's new or it's substantially different, then we need to go back and we need to receive new approvals from the Board of Trustees and quite likely go through an environmental impact process again. So that is more cumbersome. So we're looking to create ourselves flexibility for the future to do some or all of these projects that appear on our master plan over time. It authorizes us to move forward conceptually. So when we are before the Board of Trustees to have this master plan approved, we will not have any funding for any of the projects that are on this list. We will not have any schematic drawings of any of the buildings that are on this list. We won't have the jots and tittles together for how this is going to come together. But it will show the campus, the Board of Trustees, what our vision is for the campus, how we envision collectively the campus interacting to promote student success, and that's important. Now, because of the enormity of this task, quite frankly, and the intelligent and diverse perspectives that were needed to execute this successfully, this entire process was guided by direct input from the very people who will be here in the future, our faculty, our staff, and our community. In short, all of you began as part of this process. We began with an executive task force that represented pretty much every corner of the campus and the community. We then enlisted a premier architectural firm to help us with this through this process because it is technical in nature. We launched a campus master plan website with full details and comment forms for everybody to look at. We took our questions on the road with meetings, with students, with faculty, with staff, with community, with stakeholders to solicit input, and we got a lot of input. We hosted 3 open forums on campus to gather your ideas. And all the time we've been collecting this feedback and comments from the community and using it to inform our different options and come to this preferred option. Throughout that roadshow and the town halls and our website, sort of 3 main questions evolved that we kept asking ourselves. What do we love most about our campus? What's good about it? Why do we like what we have? What do we want to see more of on our campus? And what do we want to protect and enhance on our campus? On the first question, the feedback was pretty unanimous. We love most about our campus the parts of our campus that lead to a campus community. The library, the TSU, the quad, areas for gathering, areas for creating a vital and vivid experience for our faculty, our staff, and our students. As to the second question of what we would like more, no surprise, since we know what we like, we know we want more of it. So folks wanted more gathering spaces, more community, better connection among our buildings, better pathways to lead to the creation of interdivisional and inter-college learning and experiences. Folks also asked for more amenities. They wanted better food choices, better retail. Oh yeah, parking was in there somewhere. Housing, entertainment. Folks sought to upgrade our facilities, upgrading the lab space, the better sports facilities, collaborative learning spaces, and you'll see references to a number of those. And on the third question of what we would like to protect, folks mentioned that they wanted to protect open space, green space, to retain the community feeling that we have, and the connection to the community that we have, which of course means the Arboretum. And during this process, there were lots of rumors and discussions about we were going to pave over the Arboretum and make it a parking lot. We were going to build on the Arboretum, and we were going to put academic buildings there or student housing there. Of course, those were just rumors, and I think we've actually moved past that now, which I think is a great thing. But we've said very publicly throughout this process that we are blessed to have the Arboretum, let alone an Arboretum that's highly accredited like it is. That as an urban campus that's landlocked, we are in desperate need of open space and green space in the concrete jungle that kind of is our campus. Oh, we love our concrete jungle. Don't get me wrong, we love it, but we also love our open space. We need research space for our students, and the Arboretum provides a living laboratory for that. Our campus is dedicated to being a strong steward of space in our community, and there's no better example of that than the Arboretum. And then most importantly, our campus is dedicated to listening and working with those on our campus that believe in the Arboretum. And so I just want to make sure everybody knows, and you will see that the Arboretum is exactly as we all have envisioned it to be. Now, as everybody knows, for virtually all of its existence, the Arboretum has been a joint enterprise between the city of Fullerton and Cal State Fullerton. It is no longer going to be that. The city has decided that it doesn't want to participate in that process anymore and won't be contributing anymore. So that means the Arboretum is coming home to Cal State Fullerton. That's a little bit of an overstatement because the 26 acres have always been part of Cal State Fullerton. It is Cal State Fullerton. So it never really left home, but now we will be exclusively responsible for it, for the funding, for the administration, for the running, for the direction, for the marketing, anything. That means we need more of an academic mission connected to the Arboretum, and I'm excited for that, for its living laboratory. It means incorporating it more into the campus, making it more permeable so people can go into the Arboretum easier because it's part of our campus. It means truly integrating it into our co-curricular activities on campus, and I'm excited about that. So I want to make sure you know that under this preferred option, nothing will be built on the Arboretum that isn't for the benefit of the Arboretum. But you will see some references to building on the Arboretum, a greenhouse, sustainability projects, maybe a maintenance yard. Those things are things that the folks at the Arboretum have told us they need. And if we don't put them on this master plan, then we'll never be able to do them. But our commitment and plan is only to do those in coordination with and for the benefit of the Arboretum. And we are going to need to work with and are working strongly with the Friends of the Arboretum to continue to reach out to the community for support and to make sure that the Arboretum is around for a long time to come. And finally, throughout the master planning process, our campus was very clear that they want to invigorate campus life with more housing for students on campus, more amenities, 24-hour amenities, outdoor learning spaces, innovation spaces that spark creativity and collaboration. And already you're seeing the application of some of the information that we gathered during this process, even before we are putting the master plan before the board. That's what the promenade is about, and the study spaces and the places to sit and talk and collaborate. And as you will see in the preferred options, these improvements are just the beginning of the concept or idea that we're looking at for the future of Cal State Fullerton. In addition to these three questions that we set out to answer, there were some other questions that did begin to emerge. What are the problems we're trying to solve? What isn't working quite right, and what can we improve? How can we grow our campus to meet the demand for students that we have, and still make it a place that is comfortable, functional, and safe? How do we do all this and minimize the impact on our neighbors? So once again, you showed up during this process with your answers to your questions and giving us feedback. More than 600 people attended our events with interactive displays and collecting hundreds of your Post-it notes and stickers. We fielded more than 350 emails and comments throughout the website, and every voice came to the table to be part of the consideration of the process that we've been going through to narrow this to our preferred option that we're introducing today. So I hope you will be pleased with our plan for smart growth, sustainability, traffic management, and even hopefully a pedestrian bridge connecting Nutwood and the rest of our campus for student safety and for traffic flow. I truly believe that with your help, we've created a bold vision for what Cal State Fullerton can and will be over the next 15 years, giving our students a sense of belonging and inspiring them to reach higher, as we like to say here at Cal State Fullerton, improving our already stellar standing as a steward of place for the community, the state, and the nation. And with all that, I'd like to invite our architects from Flat Architecture to come up and to the podium and provide the details, and then there'll be time for questions after their presentation. Thank you, guys.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Andrew Cunningham from Flat Architects with my colleague Brad Leafley. And thank you very much, Mr. President, for the opening remarks. A truly visionary display of information. You're about to see the dryness of the plan that we will now deliver. You've heard the vision and now the details. So why a master plan? As architects, we think it's all about buildings, but it's not. This is all about student success. It's about building opportunity for the future. And it's about creating an environment that is invigorating and thoughtful for future students to come to campus. As we think about the future, about how people are taught, it's important to understand what kind of environments will support teaching modalities of the future, understanding that research is now becoming an integral part of the learning process in Fullerton. It's also important to think about building community. The President spoke a lot about sense of being, sense of belonging, and how do we build that? It's really important to understand how the buildings can actually support building community, not only for people on campus, but also reaching out to the community of Fullerton as well. You are as much to do with your community beyond the walls or beyond the boundaries of the campus, and engaging the surroundings is just as important. So when we took a first look at who you really were today, you are very much a commuter campus. We heard a lot about the strife that many people had to undertake coming to school here. A lot of traffic. A lot of people had rides to come here to learn, and then they had to take a car ride home, car ride somewhere to go to find work. They had to find a car to go buy something. You had to get in a car to go eat something. So as we think to the future, the big idea is to really move from a commuter campus to a residential campus. And the idea of building community where people can live, work, play, learn, all in one place and be supportive of each other is really the notion of what this master plan is all about. And everything that you'll see is in support of building that community. So how do we plan for growth? The first milestone is to identify the number of full-time equivalent students, the FTES. So currently your master plan is capped at 25,000. The state mandates that as we plan for 1% growth annually. So not an aggressive number, but this is consistent across all 23 campuses. So it gives us a milestone for us to understand how we plan out to the future. So your master plan is going to grow from 25,000 up to 32,000, which will take us to 2039. The plans you will see today, though, will probably stretch way beyond that. you'll think, wow, how do we build all this by 2039? And the answer, as the President said, the last master plan set you up for this one. This master plan will set you up for the future as well. So what occurs in a master plan, and what do we have to include? Predominantly it's space and its buildings, but it's also the space between the buildings. We think of space in different buckets. So first of all, it's entitled space. As you bring in more students, the state allows you to be entitled to build more academic space. So with this growth, you will be entitled to something in the order of 460,000 square feet of additional teaching academic space. So that might well take care of the academics. How about the rest of what you need to do? There is the non-academic campus contributions we're looking for. An event center is part of community building. This will be not only for campus, but it will be also for the community. It's a flexible building. It could be used for athletics. It could be used for entertainment. It will have flexible seats that can pull away. You could maybe have a single tournament court in the event center. It could have 3 courts in there. It could be used for concerts. It could be used by the community. It's a resource to build community. Student housing, we spoke a little bit about increasing the number of beds on campus. Currently you have just over 2,000 beds. We're proposing adding another 3,000 to take you up to about 5,000 beds, which in the CSU system is still very modest. That's about maybe a 10% percentage of beds to the number of heads on campus. Some campuses see way in excess of that. We're also looking for informal learning spaces on campus. I think the idea, the notion of where one learns today is much more expansive. You learn everywhere. You could be learning at home. You could be learning out in the courtyards. Providing space for that is really important. The old buildings of the 1960s, 1970s were not so good at doing that. You have a lot of buildings with solid corridors with spaces off of them. We're looking to enliven the space as a learning community throughout campus. You have to live and learn, but also exercise and enjoy yourself here as well. So we'll talk a little about the amenities that will come with this as well. So beyond space, there's also the contributions of planning. And the President spoke a lot about the Arboretum, and I think we've all heard a lot about the resource that it actually has, or what it provides to campus. Now, that will be staying in its current state with the addition of some buildings, as the President said. But it really is a great respite for campus to go off there and enjoy. And the idea of green space on campus, we will talk more about how do we engage and enliven other parts of campus with the idea of green space and open space. Sustainability, there's been a lot about climate change in the press recently, and how does sustainability inform what we do? We are looking to maybe reduce the energy usage of the buildings that you currently have, provide energy on campus, make buildings which are up to current code, which will be less energy demanding. And really what you'll be doing is contributing to a more sustainable environment overall. So there will be some guidelines in the master plan about some lofty goals around where this will be going. Mobility hubs, how we get to and from campus is a big deal. We see lines of cars outside trying to get into campus in the morning. Understanding that different modalities of Lyft and Uber, other transportation modalities, how we use rideshare to get to campus. And to plan for that, we'll show you 3 locations where our mobility hubs will be able to accommodate that and really make coming to campus a much more pleasurable experience. Building height, we heard about, let's build higher, not spread out. Let's conserve green space and use the land that we have more effectively. Land is definitely a limited resource, and it's important that we engage with that and we plan thoughtfully for the future. So what you'll be seeing are buildings which are probably a little higher than what you've got, although there are obviously some tall buildings on campus. But as we look to the future, we are looking to go higher, but still provide the green space around them. And we'll talk about the historic loop, and this will become more evident when we get to the plan, demonstrate really what that is all about. And then we talked about the bridge across Nutwood. Safety is important, and as we think about how we move around campus, it will be really key. So how do we make way for all of this? There are definitely some existing structures on campus that perhaps have outlived their useful life or perhaps should be repurposed. So while there is no timeline for the removal of any of these projects, the idea is that these are strategically identified because they are not being optimized or they do not fulfill the mission of the current master plan. So there will be a variety of reasons, whether they are perhaps low-rise buildings, whether they're old and the cost of renovating them is actually in excess of what a new building would cost, or maybe it's just not in the right place, and finding what is the appropriate place for some of these programs. So this is I'm not going to go through all the numbers on this one, but just to indicate there is the math behind the plan as well. As we move through the environmental impact report process and we get approval from the Chancellor's office, this needs to be backed up by numbers, not only from the head count, the enrollment, but also the metrics from the building area. So while it looks like a lot of area, what's important to take away from here is that there's a lot of investment actually in the community components of the plan, relative to amenities, relative to living and learning on campus. So again, it's all driven around campus and student success. So parking is the evil necessary of any master plan, but the idea of this master plan is to mitigate it and see how we can potentially not build parking structures and build buildings that would actually support student success. So you start to analyze parking requirements based on demand, and it's actually categorized by residential students, by commuter students, and by faculty and staff. I won't go into the numbers, but it's a large number of parking spaces, almost 4,400 parking spaces that will be required on campus. What we're really interested though in looking at is doing transportation demand management, TDM. So through different ways, demand of what the number of spaces that we need on campus by implementing different strategies. So these are not cumulative. As you do one, the other one actually gets negated to a certain degree. But it's important to think that the campus is currently already doing many TDM strategies on campus. So what our plan is looking to do is actually to heighten that. And probably the most significant of all of these is to think about mandated no cars for freshmen as they come onto campus. So as you build housing, you say to the freshman students, you can't bring your car onto campus. What you save by that is actually, I'll demonstrate, is actually a huge savings in terms of area, but also where your capital can go to focus on teaching programs. Many of us use different strategies that are already up here, Zipcar, Lyft, Uber, and how do we leverage those as well to maybe incentivize people to come in groups of people to campus. So again, idea here is to actually reduce the demand. And our hope over the course is actually to reduce the demand maybe by half, or at least by 25%. So the money for a parking structure can go to other functions. So the timing of when we build these structures is equally important as well. What this graph demonstrates is if we were not to build housing, the red line that goes up to the top right indicates that amount of parking that we would require on campus. So by building housing, we start to reduce that demand, and it allows us to maybe use that to focus the buildings elsewhere. The timing of when we do that is up to us though, and it's important to understand the phasing, and we'll talk about the phasing as we get to the end of the presentation about what goes when, but it becomes a strategy about when we think about bringing parking structures online. So we think about land use currently on campus. You are somewhat divided at the minute, being a commuter campus. Existing is on the left, where the blue area is really the academic core, and the playing fields, Arboretum to the top. As we look to the future, the idea is having this integrated campus where living learning blends with active learning. So the blue is then integrated with the red lines, and this is really the vital hub of campus. The idea is still that the academic core and the vitality of learning still occurs to the south side of campus, and the living becomes the midway point, and then athletics and the Arboretum is still to the north. So this becomes sort of the planning roadmap of how we envisage where certain functional uses would want to be. We talked a little about building heights, and the building code requires certain different regulations when you go to a high rise, which is defined as being any building with a living area 75 feet above grade level. So in our strategies, we do not want to trigger that. There's a number of buildings on campus that have that, and it requires an investment where your money could be used just better, to be honest. So all the plans you will see are buildings which are less than high rise, but the strategy is here that you still get a good amount of density.
So we went back to the beginning. The president mentioned this campus is 61 years old now, and kind of looked through its evolution through time. And not surprisingly, the campus has always been about student success, but it's grown incrementally and frankly has been responding to changes in the way people think and work and learn through the ages. So we continue on in that method of way of thinking with this work. And we always have been thinking about it around 5 principal drivers, if you will. Learning, teaching learning, the modalities of learning. This generation's learners learn in a certain way and next will be different, and what's happened in the past is different from all of that. So driving student success means being relevant in the way you teach and learn, how you experience that academic process. The second is connection. And in all parts of our lives, we're more connected than we've ever been. In this case, it's about connecting ideas and connecting people towards the end of living a greater life of the mind. And that is what this university is ultimately all about. The third thing was values, the value of scholarship, and the value of innovation, and the value of health and well-being. And health and well-being, I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but all across America and in every higher ed settings we're involved in, health and well-being has risen to being one of the top 3 drivers of master planning. It's interesting in the way that it affects every moment of your life. And so it would be not surprising that it would manifest itself in the way master planning is conducted. The fourth is identity. And 2 ways to think about identity. One is the identity of the campus in the greater community in which it exists in Orange County, but also how you create identity within the campus itself and how important that is to the experience of daily life. And the final one is community, and really is the activation of community, how you bring about that activation on a daily basis. So the trick is, how do you make those things come forward using planning parameters? And there are a number of ways to do that, a number of ways of breaking that down and unbundling that. The first is open space, and you know, if any of you ask yourself to envisage in your mind's eye what a campus setting is all about, it's oftentimes about the non-built space. It's about the courtyards, the pathways, the open spaces all across campus. And in this case, we've created a series of larger open spaces on campus that begin to define sub-portions of the community in their daily understanding of where they are on campus and how they use that space. The second thing is circulation, and circulation is of utmost importance to everyone on campus because there just isn't enough time to move around, and you need to move from here to there and get there as quickly and expeditiously as you can. And then thirdly is identity, and you can see here that along the freeway there are opportunities to look into the campus. Certainly as you drive along Nutwood, along College Place, there are ways of orienting yourself to entry points. In this case, just to take a moment here, you can see down here this circle, and then this one, and then this one are all representing transit hubs. They're organized places by which most people might come to campus and begin to find their way into campus. All open spaces are not created equal. And many open spaces have very specific functions. It's important that that variegation occur on campus in meaningful ways so that people inside the buildings and outside the buildings can use that open space in ways that make sense to them in their daily lives. Likewise, all circulation is not created equal, and in this case, you can see at the top line on the right in the legend that automobile access is limited for the most part to the edges of campus, moving around the community, and then gaining access to parking. After that, as you come into campus, becomes service vehicle, and then down to skateboards and things like that, in addition to obviously pedestrian walkways. activation strategy. This is particularly important to spend a little bit more time on because it is widely understood that 70% of the learning that happens on campus happens outside of structured classroom hours. 70% of the learning that happens on campus happens between classes, and it happens between students and faculty who find places to work together to understand what they're about to hear or what they just heard. And right now on campus, there are some, but they're not a lot. There's a real dearth of space like that. And so it's important that we increase the sense of scholarship and that sense of connection by increasing the number of places people can work together to collaborate, to understand, and to grow. And that puts a lot of pressure on the ground plane of the campus because it's at the ground plane where most of those people will be most of the hours of the day. As you go up physically, vertically in a campus, it becomes, I think you could say, arguably more specialized and less populated. But at the ground plane, it's important that this kind of increase in social connection begins to really take hold and create a place for campus in the future. So this is a composite of all of those things coming together. It's called the proposed plan. It's the preferred option plan. And you can see how some of those activities are overlaid with each other. And I'll give it back to Andrew in a second, but so you can enjoy his Scottish accent as opposed to mine. There's an awful lot of emphasis on the academic core. The academic core becomes a little more dense, and the open space becomes a little bit more intentional. The movement through the campus is a little bit more refined. And what's most important to the campus, in my estimation, is that the modality of learning has extended from sort of that beginning didactic stage of education to then experimentation, coming to understand and exercise that knowledge in a lab or some sort of active space, to active learning spaces where students are working with each other on problems, and finally to innovation. How do you express what you've learned and apply yourself to something that can be different, given back to the world through innovation? And in this case, this red building in the center is the proposed innovation center. And it's not a makerspace. It's in the sense of it being strictly oriented towards STEM, but it's a place where all departments and colleges of campus can come together and wrestle with creating what's next. And what's so important about that is that in a teaching, learning rich environment like CSU, to step up to that in an undergraduate level and speak to harnessing the power of student creativity and ideas working with faculty is a tremendous surge in the power of place. And it's a tremendous legacy that can be created for all of Fullerton.
So as ideas bantered around and put on the table and discussed and rationalized, one of the big topics we talked about was locations of housing. So that's these yellow areas here. One of the big questions was, should all housing be grouped together into one large community, or should we be actually creating neighborhoods? It was generally thought that the creation of neighborhoods, obviously you have your existing area with food, was a great neighborhood in its own, but we should be thinking about creating a new neighborhood, and how do we create this cross-fertilization, encourage people to move across campus. The location of program on the campus becomes a way of actually encouraging people to move. So a lot of this was actually thoughtfully put together. Also, for example, a large purple spot here, this is the event center, that migrated around campus in multiple locations during our process. The idea here, though, that it's actually a big activator in the center of campus. It's located close to proposed parking structures, so easy to get to off 57, to park, to have an event, But as Brad was talking, the Innovation Center here, you actually create this very large open space between the Event Center and Innovation. And you could think of this as a highly activated space, potentially for corporate events, for career fairs on campus, for graduation events. The idea of having open space next to buildings which become activated is really key. So we're always thinking about how do we conjoin open space with built space. It's open space between buildings and courtyards relative to built space. Really, really key. Brad talked about the hubs, so the south, the west, and the north. And then we have housing also down by College Park. So this is faculty and staff housing included. But the idea here is that you could have an activated ground plane, maybe with some retail. And thinking about how these actually get delivered. A lot of people have said, how on earth are you going to pay for all of this? You know, that's a big component, a big consideration of what is the funding strategy. So whether these are what they call P3 development strategies, public-private partnership development strategies, where these become standalone developments in their own right, you allow someone to come in and actually partner with the university to help you realize your vision. And then if need be, these could be at housing rates that maybe the neighbors could use as well if the university couldn't fill them up as well. Brad talked about the historic loop and the green loop, and I think we probably want to end on that a little bit around the planning principle, because it's not just a pathway, it's actually about a living learning experience as you move through the campus. The idea here is you exercise, there could be areas where you could stop, there could be learning opportunities on there, there could be areas to exercise, maybe areas to park your bicycles. So again, it actually becomes an active environment as well. And we've been referring to this as the string of pearls, where the green loop is really the string, and then all the pearls of the program hang on this. And your experience as you walk around the loop, around campus, really is a very varied experience, really quite tremendous. So how do we do this? Obviously, this will not all get built in a single phase. This is over a multi-phase period, and we're very careful not to put dates on these. We have no idea when the final realized plan will get completed. But the idea is to think about a logical sequence, how you might approach this. So we're always looking for the low-hanging fruit. Where is the biggest bang for your buck that you could do in phase one? So you'll see there's a number of ones in buildings which are colored light blue. Those are renovation. These are existing buildings that you currently have that are in dire need of perhaps a refresh or revisioning from an academic perspective. And that is where there's currently many feasibility studies going on campus in order to revitalize those areas. Housing is also key. Some of the design for this housing is currently underway, so we should be seeing some of that coming online soon. Again, I think as we described relative to building community, how do we get people on campus? So building houses as quickly as we can would be a key for that. The idea is to defer, obviously, the building of parking structures for as long as we can. The idea of the event center would actually be connected to the partial demolition of KHS. So as the gym comes offline, then the event center would come online. So there's a phasing, there's a timing of all these strategies. There's a sequence where there's not a right and a wrong, but there's a better and a worse way of approaching this. So this is just a very sort of quick, high-level overview of 20 months of work. I'm sure there are many questions out there. We are not completely finished with our process yet. We are going through an environmental impact report phase, where we had a meeting on campus about a month ago where everybody was invited to come and put their ideas about what should be studied. That process is going concurrently with the master plan. So those documents come together and then forms a legal document that goes to the state for approval. And we would envisage that will probably go through the beginning of next year when those two documents will be concluded, this being the preferred plan, and the EIR has been based upon this. It's the evaluation of what this plan represents. So while this represents a sort of a rudimentary three-dimensional visualization, you should not think of this as the design. It's more about placement of program to stimulate a vision for the future. Each one of these colored parcels will be individually studied in their entirety. A different architectural team will come on board and work with the faculty and staff and students to understand, okay, what is the character of this space, and what you will end up getting built probably will look very different from what is shown here. However, the massing will change, although the location and the strategies of how the location of programs is there to build a framework for the longer plan of the university. So with that, I think we will open up for questions and answers. I think we will have a couple of roving mics around the room here. So if anybody would like to raise their hand, I will try and direct the lady. Right, yeah, ASF and GSF. So that's architectural geek talk for gross square footage and assignable square footage. So assignable square footage is the area that you see within the room here. When you gross up a building, it includes the hallway, the stairs, the elevator, restrooms. So typically for academic buildings, there may be about 60% efficient buildings. So it's that grossing factor. So you're right, in that big chart, the ASF, while it was a lot, the GSF was enormous, and you would have seen that the parking structures were on that as well. All the housing was on there as well. But it's that grossing factor that inflates that. None at all. No, we are not looking at budgeting. This is more about a vision for the future, about where does the campus want to go to from an aspirational point of view to support student success. I think the president was pretty clear, saying, where and when this will get funded will be incrementally done, and the bottom line on this, because it may well be some of these buildings won't be built for 40 years, probably, to be honest, and who knows. And you will want the flexibility. Within 40 years, we may not be driving to campus. Parking structures will go away, and that piece of land will come clean for something else. So think of it as a roadmap and a way to guide development, just as your 2003 master plan did as well. It has guided you to this point today. There are elements here that we've picked up on, and this will be the foundation for the next master plan. Thank you. Yes, sir.
6 floors before it becomes a high-rise? Does that mean all of these buildings are going to be 6 floors?
Probably not. No. What we wanted to do was test capacity, and I think it was to understand what would it look like. I think there are already some feasibility studies out there for some buildings up here that are actually much less than 6 stories. Yeah. So again, this is more about perhaps a roadmap of what might be rather than what will be.
So if something, and a different question, if something is red as opposed to blue, does it mean it has to fit in the red category, or can it become a blue item?
Absolutely, yeah. So where red goes is actually, you picked on probably the one color that actually wants to be everywhere. That is the amenity space that activates. It's the ground plane development that Brad talked about, and that really wants to be smeared ideally on the ground plane on every building, and then probably incrementally on upper floors as you move through the building. We talk about it in some academic campuses as being the sticky part of the buildings where people want to linger and hang out. And that would be at the university's discretion where that would end up.
Thank you.
Let me just add a little bit more to that. From the very beginning, and talking to faculty, but also to students, there's a tremendous amount of interest in getting after real-world problems in real-world ways. And so that begins to drive questions about multidisciplinary teaching learning, but also research and innovation too. And so also what you don't see up here is, where does the biology building go? Because it's not really relevant anymore. That's not the kind of leadership that a campus like this would bring to the equation. But what is leadership is making sure that there's a framework for people working together that is flexible in both formal and informal ways. And that's what really we're trying to display.
For funding of the master plan, which started again about 20 months ago, the funds came from the campus, from our capital programs fund. And so that is basically the money that we had budgeted back, I guess, last fiscal year for this purpose. And then in terms of realizing the master plan, I think if you add up and do a quick estimate of all the buildings, it would require many billions of dollars. Most of the funds for academic buildings would come from the state or donors, because these are classroom spaces and research spaces for which state fund those buildings. Some of the non-academic buildings, it could be multiple fund sources. Housing, for example, you would fund it from housing revenue. So, so that would be the fund source for that. So there are multiple fund sources that we would have to consider once we decided to move forward with any one of the buildings.
I noticed that the event center is to be built with the partial demolition of the KHS building. And the KHS building now houses 2 large departments. And it's unclear to me what the plan is for those 2 departments and where they might end up.
So the plan is to leave kinesiology in that building and not touch them. We heard that it was really more the gym that was not meeting current requirements. So as one thinks about envisioning what the gym is and what it wants to be, the idea was that part of KHS would remain, but the gym portion would be the one that would be removed. And then if there were programs which would be displaced, and as Brad said, our job was not to go and identify any of the blue blocks for academic programs, that certain program would be here, certain programs would be there. That would be decided as and when the building actually came into construction, or when that relocation needed to be identified.
Provide some.
You guys wanna-
I'm sorry. Who asked the question? Okay. I know that a comment was made about portion of KHS will be demolished to make room for the event center, but what's meant by that is right when we looked at the building, only the gym portion will be repurposed into this new building. Whether or not any other programs would go into the new building, because either we want to build it or move it to the new building, or it gets displaced by something else. Again, those things, right now, we don't consider those things at all. Once the campus decides to move forward with the event center, at that point, we would go through the whole process of making sure that all of those things are considered at that time. So right now, I think it was kind of premature to think of this as KHS, any portion of the KHS being demolished. No, nothing's determined in terms of if an academic department would move or not. All master plan does is identify the functions of the campus, of those programs. And so, for example, again, the gym, if we build a new event center, I'm sure the basketball courts and volleyball activities will move to the center. So that's as far as we got.
So I have a question that is related to the kinesiology health sciences building, and it's again a clarification, because that building not only houses the one gym, that is the one that people are referring to, but there are other gyms that are used for our physical activity classes, and there are classrooms, and there are multiple laboratories that are part of the building. So reallocation of that building in the planning needs to consider not just the athletics, but also all the academics that go in there, specifically what we do in our laboratories, which is part of the teaching that we do in kinesiology and health sciences both.
Maybe I could just explain maybe a little.
Nursing and nursing.
Sorry.
And nursing.
Yeah. Maybe it would help to explain sort of the process of how some of these plans are envisaged. Think of this as flying at 50,000 feet. and it's just a big, broad idea. When there is money available to maybe even start to think about implementing one of these projects, there would be an individual feasibility study done on that building. When that team would get involved, they would come and meet with you. They would understand the adjacencies of what your program would need, the functions, understanding. I think you also use the intramural fields as well and your proximity to that. So understanding what all those critical adjacencies are, and as you sort of move through this process, you start to drill down. You go from 50,000 feet down to 20,000 feet. Ultimately, when you do the building plans, then you'll be down at ground zero. But the idea is that at a master plan level, we can't get into that level of detail, unfortunately, to sort of solve out all the problems. And to be honest, we really don't want to, because we want to allow you to have the flexibility. If we were to dial down this document to be that specific, we will be here for the next 10 years probably. But it would also start to tie your hands about flexibility, about what you may want to do, and when funding becomes available, your ideas may actually change as well. So this document becomes part of a state recorded document, and it's important that it actually does hold flexibility for you to be able to move from side to side and to have some judgment. It's just really that first level check, and it gives you the approval also from a funding point of view with your FTES in order to keep the wheels turning for funding to come into the campus. Does that help?
Moving, oh, I think it just started working. This one works. Okay, great. I have a question about the increased number of student housing and from where they are, and also the faculty housing. You know, it's all on the peripheries of campus, and I assume that these 3,500 people or so are going to be newly brought into campus. So you're not necessarily targeting people who are already residents of Fullerton and living off campus close by, but people that weren't living, so be adding additional residents to the city. Is there something in the master plan or in that environmental impact report that you were talking about putting together about the impacts of the increased traffic on the local streets in Fullerton, the increased flow around the campus, just trying to, because that traffic flow you have around campus, we've all been stuck in that loop already. And so adding all those additional people, just kind of thinking about what the impacts of that would be and whether or not the master plan would address that and also work with the city on that.
So short answer, yes. So traffic implications is part of the EIR. There is a traffic engineer who gets involved and starts to look at the impacts, not so much perhaps the level of service impacts at all the traffic signals around the campus, but they're also looking at the state is now actually analyzing traffic from a different perspective about vehicle miles traveled by individuals, you know, in an essence to try to stop people from driving too far. So the idea of actually bringing people on campus is in essence an effort to try to reduce the amount of traffic. I think what we've been seeing is that people commute into campus, they leave maybe to go get a job, and they maybe come back for a later class, and they may well do 2 or 3 trips in a day. The idea, if we can have people living on campus, they'll make one trip. If we have amenities on campus, they can live, they can eat, they can work on campus. And the vision here is that actually the traffic demand will go down.
I have a question about the renovation plan. The renovation is going to be done for the existing buildings, and that's stage 1. So what are your plans about accommodating those that are being affected by the renovation? Will you be planning it during the breaks, or will the faculty be moving out, or how will you address that? Thank you.
Yes, so that's a phasing sort of surge strategy question. So I think one of the goals of the master plan is to identify potential buildings where there could be some surge space. So the idea is that there is actually a single building south of down Black Hall, potentially where there could be expansion opportunities. So you have to build that first empty chair, which then allows people to move out. Currently, you are very space constrained. You actually have a deficit of about 100,000, 95,000 square feet of space on campus. So these renovation projects will probably last maybe a year. So you can't just say, well, we'll do it maybe during summer recess for a couple of months. These will take much longer than that. So, Danny.
So for all renovation projects on campus, as part of planning, we include how we would surge the programs that will get displaced temporarily during renovation. So it's part of what we do. All the projects that we've done over the last couple of years, 2-3 years on this campus, we had to surge a lot of the tenants into other locations, and each project is different. We have to look at it on an individual basis.
Has any thought been given to perhaps purchasing a Hope University property? Has that come up?
Never come up. I will say, if they are interested in selling, I think we'll be the first in line to make an offer.
Yeah. Sure. So this is the airing of the preferred final option. So our team now goes away and we draft the actual document. So that'll take a couple of months to put that together. And here we go. Yep. So the final document will come together in January time. And then there are some procedural requirements for that. We'll have to go through to the Board of Trustees in Long Beach for their final ratification. So the EIR is probably now the most important document to develop in conjunction with this. They had to wait for us to really get the plan in place in order for them to do the analysis to say, okay, what is the environmental impact of this plan? So that is now well underway. We had the scoping meeting that we met at a couple of weeks ago. So they are in full thrust, and they will have a draft, I think, probably come early January as well. These documents will come together. They will be reviewed by the campus community as well. And then we'll move through to the finalization of it, probably in Q2 next year. I think the campus is eager to get this wrapped up and move forward. So, any final thoughts, comments? Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your input today. And also, thank you very much for your input for the last 20 months as well. This has been quite the journey for all of us. Thank you.